But I want to say one thing to the American people. I want you to listen to me. I'm going to say this again. I did not have sexual relations with that woman, Miss Lewinsky. I never told anybody to lie, not a single time, never.
It is no secret that politicians often lie, but consider this, they can do so simply by telling the truth. Confused? The line between truth and lies is becoming ever murkier nowadays. There's even a word for a very different form of lying. That statement becomes clearer when you realize that we've probably all done it. A classic example might be if your mom asks if you finished your homework and you respond, "I've written an essay on Tennessee Williams for my English class." This may be true, but it doesn't actually answer the question about whether your homework was done. That essay could have been written long ago and you have misled your poor mother with a truthful statement. You might not have even started your homework yet. Misleading by telling the truth is so pervasive in daily life that a new term has recently been employed by psychologists to describe it: paltering. That it is so widespread in society now gives us more insight into the gray area between truth and lies, and perhaps even why we lie at all. Let's be honest, we often find ourselves bending the truth, despite the fact that it costs us considerably more mental effort to lie than to tell the truth. US President Abraham Lincoln once said that, "No man has a good enough memory to be a successful liar." On the other hand, becoming a good liar means constantly keeping track of your fabrications, a task that demands exceptional mental agility and often leads to inevitable slip-ups. In 1996, psychologist and researcher Bella DePaulo found that each of us lies about once or twice a day. She discovered this by asking participants for 1 week to note down each time they lied, even if they did so with a good intention. Out of the 147 participants in her original study, only 7 said they didn't lie at all, and we can only guess if they were telling the truth. Many of the lies were fairly innocent, or even kind, such as, "I told her that she looked good when I thought that she looked like a blimp." Some were to hide embarrassment, such as pretending a spouse had not been fired. DePaulo says that the participants in her study were not aware of how many lies they told, partly because most were so ordinary and so expected that we just don't notice them. It is when individuals use lies to manipulate others or to purposely mislead that it is more worrying, and this happens more often than you might think. When Todd Rogers, a behavioral scientist at Harvard Kennedy School, and his colleagues were looking at how often politicians dodge questions during debates, they realized something else was going on. By stating another truthful fact, they could get out of answering a question. They could even imply something was truthful when it was not. Politicians do this all the time. Todd Rogers found that paltering was an extremely common tactic of negotiation. Over half the 184 business executives in his study admitted to using the tactic. The research also found that the person doing the paltering believed it was more ethical than lying outright. The individuals who had been deceived, however, did not distinguish between lying and paltering. It probably leads to too much paltering, as communicators think that when disclosed, it will be somewhat ethical, whereas listeners see it as a lie. It is also difficult to spot a misleading fact when we hear something that on the face of it sounds true. For instance, the UK's Labour Party campaign video to lower the voting age said, "You're 16. Now you can get married, join the army, work full-time." But these facts do not tell the whole truth. You can only join the army aged 16 or 17 with your parents' permission. At that age you also need your parents' permission to get married unless you do so in Scotland. Since 2013, 16 and 17-year-olds cannot work full-time in England, but can in the other 3 home nations with some restrictions. In another example, Donald Trump paltered during the presidential debates. He was questioned about a housing discrimination lawsuit early on in his career and stated that his company had given no admission of guilt. While they may not have admitted it, an investigation by the New York Times found that his company did discriminate based on race. And even if we do spot misleading truths, social norms can prevent us from challenging whether or not they are deceptive. Take a now infamous interview in the UK, where journalist Jeremy Paxman interviewed the politician Michael Howard. Paxman repeatedly asks Howard whether he threatened to overrule the then prison's governor. Howard in turn continues to evade the question with other facts in a bizarre exchange that becomes increasingly awkward to watch. Not many of us are comfortable challenging someone in that way. While it's common in politics, so too is it in everyday life. Consider the estate agent who tells a potential buyer that an unpopular property has had lots of inquiries when asked how many actual bids there have been. Or the used car salesman who says a car started up extremely well on a frosty morning, without disclosing that it broke down the week before. Both statements are true but mask the reality of the unpopular property and the dodgy car. Paltering is perhaps so commonplace because it is seen as a useful tool. It happens because we constantly have so many competing goals. We want to achieve our narrow objective, like selling a house or car, but we also want people to see us as ethical and honest. These two goals are in tension, and by paltering, people believe they are being more ethical than outright lying. We can see the problems this sort of thinking can cause reflected in society today. The public are clearly sick of being lied to, and trust in politicians is plummeting. One 2016 poll found that the British public trust politicians less than estate agents, bankers and journalists. And despite the fact that we now frequently expect lies from those in power, it remains challenging to spot them in real time, especially so if they lie by paltering.
Is this on? Hello, hello, hello.
Psychologist Robert Feldman, author of The Liar in Your Life, sees this as worrying both on a personal and on a macro level. When we're lied to by people in power, it ruins our confidence in political institutions. It makes the population very cynical about their real motivations. Lying can and does clearly serve a devious social purpose. It can help someone paint a better picture than the truth, or help a politician dodge an uncomfortable question. It's unethical and it makes our democracy worse. But it's how human cognition works. Unfortunately, the prevalence of lies might stem from the way we are brought up. Lies play a role in our social interactions from a very young age. We tell young children about tooth fairies and Santa, or encourage a child to be grateful for an unwanted present. We give our kids very mixed messages. What they ultimately learn is that even though honesty is the best policy, it's also at times fine and preferable to lie about things. All in all, the art of lying by telling the truth is a skillful manipulation of facts and truths to create a misleading or deceptive narrative. This technique involves presenting accurate information in a way that leads the listener or reader to a false conclusion. Here are 5 methods used in this practice. 1. Selective presentation. Only sharing specific facts that support a particular narrative while omitting other relevant information that might provide a more balanced perspective. 2. Context manipulation. Presenting true information out of context to make it seem more significant or alarming than it actually is. 3. Implication. Using true statements that imply something false without directly stating it, leaving the listener to draw incorrect conclusions. 4. Emphasis and de-emphasis. Highlighting certain truths and downplaying others to skew perception. 5. Literal truth, deceptive impression. Answering questions with technically correct answers that are intended to mislead the questioner about the true situation. This approach can be particularly effective because it relies on the inherent trust that people have in the truth, exploiting it to mislead or deceive without technically lying. So next time you hear a fact that sounds odd, or someone to be deflecting a question, be aware that what you think is the truth may very well be deceptive. So what do you think about paltering? Thanks for watching. If you like this content, please hit that like button and subscribe to this channel for more. I'll see you in the next one.